Hi, welcome to People in Perspective. I'm Brandon Tennicott. Join with me today is Frank Main, an award-winning journalist from Chicago. Thanks for joining me today, Frank.
Sure, thanks, Brandon.
So, where do you work right now? Where are you writing, and like, what type of journalism do you do?
I write for the Chicago Sun-Times, and I've been doing that since 1999. So, a long time. And I cover criminal justice, and I'm an investigative reporter. So I look at lots of different policy issues involving crime, and I write big, long stories about them. And so I just finished a big project on drug arrests this weekend.
And so, like, when did you know you wanted to, like, become an investigative journalist and just be a journalist in general?
So I went to school at Emory University in Atlanta, and I was in the pre-law program. I wanted to be a lawyer. I had always been a good writer, and I thought that would help me as a lawyer. And my senior year, I was in a honors program, and I decided to get a job at a TV station to see how politics and the media kind of interact. It was for a political science major that I was doing, and I just got hooked on journalism in that TV program, and wound up completely changing my whole course. And I had already applied to law schools, and all of a sudden I applied to a few journalism programs, and that's how I got my start.
And so where did you go to further your education as a journalist?
I went to Northwestern University's Medill School of Journalism, and I liked that program because it was short. It was only a year instead of 2, and it was more practical than the other programs I looked at, so it was a very good decision on my part to go there. And
so you do a lot of local reporting, but you've been to other places before. You've been to the Gulf War, you've seen it, you've been to the aftermath of Katrina, 9/11, and so, like, seeing those things, how did it change your perspective sort of on writing as a local reporter?
A couple things. Whenever you cover a conflict like a war or a natural disaster, you see incredibly good things that people do and incredibly terrible things that people do. And so I saw both of those things highlighted more than I had ever seen before in covering wars and in covering hurricanes. The other thing that you learn about as a reporter is that you have to know how to think on your feet, so to speak, because things are always changing. If you're covering a war, these are people who are hired to kill each other, and so you're in an environment where it's very dangerous, and you have to be able to trust the people you're talking to. If you hire somebody as your guide, you have to make sure that they're not part of the conflict on the other side. And so I learned that I was pretty good at doing that from covering those kinds of things.
And I mean, obviously you're in war. Was there any close calls? Was there anything that, scary? Were you like directly in combat, or were you kind of just like interviewing, people in charge sort of behind the scenes?
In the first Gulf War, we had Scud missiles going over our heads and exploding all the time. So that was scary. And this was in Dhahran, Saudi Arabia. It was before the actual conflict where they went over the border. And so there was an element of danger there, and we didn't know whether Saddam Hussein was going to lob nerve gas at us. And so we had all these special masks and equipment that we would put on whenever these Scud attacks occurred. So that was one thing. I remember when I landed in Bosnia, which was another war, immediately, I got a ride with a Stars and Stripes reporter who had an armored Jeep, and we were getting shot at as we were driving from the military base to the first city that I covered, which was Tuzla, and that was scary. So yeah, I mean, there's some hairy situations that occur when you get yourself in that kind of a situation, and my wife made me promise that I would never cover a war again after our children were born, so
yeah.
I haven't done that since.
So flash forward, you're now a Pulitzer Prize-winning, journalist. When did you win that? 2011, right?
Yes.
And so it's about No Snitch Code in Chicago, and that's the reason why lots of murders go unsolved, and that's still a problem today. What inspired you to write that?
It was a completely random thing, and a lot of journalism is kind of random. So there's a book that was written by a person named David Simon, who did The Wire and some other famous TV shows. And he originally was a reporter in Baltimore, and he wrote a book called Homicide: Life on the Streets. And that book, he spent all this time with murder detectives and covered what they did, and they allowed him to tag along with him. So I wanted to do the same thing in Chicago. So long story short, I spent 6 months with detectives, embedded with them on the northwest side of Chicago, and they never solved the murder. So the whole premise of my story was I'm going to watch detectives solve a murder. And they didn't. And my reporters, my editors were like, well, what are we paying you to do? Not write stories, just hang out with the cops? And so they made me come back and stop my project, and it never went anywhere. And we decided that we would flip the script and we would do a story about these guys not solving murders. And that was the No Snitch Code, which is essentially all these gang members, even though they were friends with the victim, would not cooperate and talk to the detectives about it. And that launched this project that I worked on with Mark Conkle and John Kim. John is a photographer, and it had a lot of different pieces, but the main piece was that 6 months I spent with those cops on the northwest side.
So did you really you were with them for 6 months, you said. Was it in the car with them? Would you see these scenes of, violence and stuff? And what did you really learn about how the police works and the limitations to how they solve these incidents?
Yes, I was in the car with them all the time. We spent a lot of time not working on this particular case when they had other stuff to do. So I was at murder scenes, and I'm in those scenes in a different way than a reporter would normally be because I have all this access. You learn that these guys have an encyclopedic knowledge of the city, and homicide detectives especially have encyclopedic memory about suspects, their names, when they last saw them, snitches, that whole kind of thing. So that was very interesting. They work really hard. I mean, I would go in at 6 or 7 in the evening, and I'd work till 2 with these guys. And then they'd have to get up at 8 o'clock in the morning and go to court. And so they're working almost around the clock. And so I had great respect for their work ethic as well. And so it's a shame that they aren't able to solve more cases, but it's not that they're not working. It's that there are all these different forces that are preventing from doing that. So I learned all that by hanging out with these guys. And by the way, they're funny. They have kind of a gallows sense of humor. They tell lots of jokes. I would tell you one, but it would take too long. But anyway.
So, obviously winning such a big award, and that puts you on the map, sort of. If you weren't already. And so, how did you find out that you won this, and what went through you? Did you ever think you were going to get something like this?
Absolutely not. We were in our newsroom, which then was at 401 North Wabash, which is now the Trump Tower, if you know where that is. It's been knocked down. Our building was knocked down. Anyway, an editorial assistant who was working on the desk got a call that we had won the Pulitzer Prize, and he yelled across the newsroom, and we thought he was joking. And then we looked on the wire, and sure enough, it had been announced, and the place went crazy. So the Sun-Times, it's a fairly rare occurrence to win a Pulitzer Prize. We have won them before. Roger Ebert was the one before me. He was our film critic. And so unlike big papers like the New York Times and the Washington Post, we don't have a cabinet with champagne glasses and wine ready to go. And so somebody had to go to the CVS, get plastic wine glasses, and somebody went down there and bought a bottle of Prosecco, and then we had our celebration. So it was completely unexpected.
I mean, and how did that feel? You win such you, especially not expecting it. How did you feel? You obviously you just get you just party for a week straight. What's going on there?
Yeah, I mean, what really was going through my mind is that the Sun-Times was really going through a hard time then, and there were layoffs there, and we were still doing good work. We still are, and it's always like we had a hand behind our back over the last 15 years or so because we had staff cutbacks. The newspaper industry got much harder, and there were moments in the Sun-Times recent history where we thought we might not even survive. And so it was kind of a validation for the newspaper more than these 3 journalists, I think. And so that's why it was such a great celebration for the paper that when we won this prize. And we touted it on the front of the newspaper and stuff, and let our readers know that we actually do good journalism here, and we actually got recognized for this.
Well, I'd like to thank you for coming on, talking to me for a couple minutes, and I'm Brandon Tennicott, and thank you for watching People in Perspective. See you next time.